Buying an apartment complex can seem like a daunting or almost impossible task as a busy professional. Today, I'll be talking about the active and passive roles in taking down an apartment complex. Welcome back, investors. I'm Brian Wagers, and on this channel, I'll show busy professionals like yourself how to invest in apartment complexes without spending hours of your own time. Make that first investment by subscribing and liking so you don't miss an opportunity. The great thing about apartment complexes is there are two types of ownership: active ownership and passive ownership. Today, I'll be talking about 5 differences in the two types of ownership. The first and major difference between active and passive ownership is purchasing or acquiring the apartment complex. As an active investor, we are tasked with finding and negotiating the deal. There are multiple ways to finding an apartment complex, including finding old addresses of apartment owners, whether that's driving around looking at distressed properties, taking down the addresses, looking up the owner, whether that's checking out listing sites such as LoopNet, or developing strong relationships with commercial brokers in the area that you're searching for. Personally, that's my favorite way. Now, as an active investor, once you get a deal brought to you, part of that step is negotiating the deal. So how do they negotiate the deal? Well, first, they underwrite it. In underwriting, you want to make sure that it provides a good return to all investors that are involved in the property. Now, when you're underwriting that, you want to compare it to what the property is currently performing and what you expect it to perform under your ownership. The difference being passive investors are not yet involved, although they will want to double check the underwriting of the active investor. Now, if our underwriting checks out, we're going to be moving to the next step and the next major difference in between active investors and passive investors, being the due diligence phase. The due diligence is both financial, running the numbers, and physical, checking out the asset. We, as active investors, will be checking out financial information such as the current rent roll, T12 or a trailing 12-month income and expense report. That will show us how the property has performed the past 12 months. And we will be checking the sources of income and the sources of expenses from the past 12 months to up to the past 3 years. That should paint a full picture of what's really going on at the property. Once we have completed the financial due diligence, it's time to roll up our sleeves and get involved in the physical due diligence of the process. As an active investor, I'll be walking the property and checking out every single unit. I'll also be taking along my property management and construction team through the inside of every unit, as well as any exterior problems that we may or may not foresee. As a passive investor, hopefully you're doing due diligence on the active investor who's putting together the deal, his market assumptions, and his assumptions for how the property is going to perform, now and in the future. After we've completed our due diligence and it's satisfactory, or if it's unsatisfactory and we have negotiated accordingly, we're moving to the third phase. Our third major difference is closing the deal. As an active investor, we will be coordinating with the lenders, with the insurance companies, with the title companies, with the commercial brokers, with the past property management and the current property management, all in sync to make sure the deal crosses a finish line. As a passive investor, you will want to have reviewed the private placement memorandum or the deal package or the business plan that the active investor has put together for this project. You will then be asked to deposit the amount that you have agreed upon for closing. The active investor will then take your money as a passive investor and group that with the other contributing passive investors to get ready to bring to the lender. Once we have those funds given to the lending company and the title company, the work has just begun for the active investor. The fourth difference being asset management. The day the property closes, we're going immediately into this phase. Now we're going to get in touch with our contractors, our vendors, our property management, and we're going to start making sure everyone is on the same page. Depending on the project, we'll be managing contractors, vendors, the property management in order to implement the business plan. Now that usually entails increasing the gross income and decreasing the expenses. This is going to be an ongoing process. The majority of it should be done in the beginning of the phase of asset management in order to maximize the potential income. This also sends a message to the current residents that there's new ownership. As a passive investor, you'll be getting monthly reports or quarterly reports, and best of all, monthly or quarterly distributions. That's what we're all here for, right? As we're working our way through the asset management phase, the active investor should be thinking about the exit. The fifth and final difference being the exit plan. With multifamily properties, there's multiple ways to exit. Now, whether that's refinancing or selling the property is going to be dependent on how the property is performing and what the initial business plan was going into the property. As a passive investor, it is as simple as deciding what you're going to be doing with your proceeds. Whether you're going to go spend that on a vacation or whether you're going to reinvest that and watch your money continue to compound. As an active investor, we're making sure that the business plan has been fully executed and the sales price is a direct reflection of that business plan. Now, as we're selling the property, the same parties that were involved in the closing period are going to be involved in the exit period. We're going to be back in touch with the insurance, the title companies, the commercial brokers, the lenders, and the attorneys. Whether it was a refinance or a sale, it should be well thought out as the active investor on what makes sense for the passive investors. So today we talked about 5 differences in the active investor role and the passive investor role in taking down an apartment complex. Finding and negotiating the deal, the due diligence, closing the deal, asset managing the deal, and exiting the deal. We can clearly see there's a very big difference in the value and the time of the active and passive investor's role in that apartment complex. With the passive investor's time, you can see a large value on that time spent. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out our other videos that we're putting out weekly. Subscribe and like so you don't miss out on an opportunity.